Hi, everyone. This is Nikhil Torskar. Really excited today because we are going to be talking with Tim Mahoney, a patient who came in for treatment recently. It's really rewarding to talk to patients who have tried all different types of treatments for the conditions they're experiencing, whether it's surgery or medication or any other host of what we would call traditional treatment modalities, and have either not had the best results they were looking for, or maybe just wasn't quite doing it for them. Tim is one of those individuals, and he's graciously agreed to come speak to us about his experience. So Tim, I want to thank you again. It's really a pleasure to have you here to talk about your experience.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here to talk to you about my experience with this process. I've had such a great experience after lifelong challenges in this area that I very much wanted to participate in a video like this so that we can get the information out about the technical results that are possible when you go through your process.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
My name again is Tim Mahoney, and I'm 55 years old, and I'm an attorney. My main office is based in Frankfort, Illinois. I also have an office in Rockford, Illinois. I'm a trial attorney, and I'm married. I recently got remarried. I got remarried during the shutdown, so congratulations to me, and we'll see if it's congratulations to my wife. So my journey started when I was 16 years old. I went to a small Catholic high school, so of course football was beyond important, and I loved the sport and played it with reckless abandon, and I ended up with a broken neck. I dove to tackle somebody and hit them with the top of my head, and I ended up with a compression fracture of C5, and I had a paralyzed left arm for a period of time. So I've been dealing with that injury since I was 16, and it's always limited me to an extent, and I healed pretty well. And I've been able to do a lot of things throughout my life, but I always figured there would be this period of time where all of a sudden my neck would fail and I would start to have surgeries and the like. And that was the information the doctors gave me all throughout my life, that at some point you were going to have surgery and things were going to happen, that you were going to go down that road, and then you were going to be significantly limited in terms of what you physically could do. So a year and a half ago, that kind of happened. I did a series of events, and my neck made it so like I couldn't look up for long periods of time or couldn't look down. And as I got older, it got a little bit worse. I started having arthritic changes. And I rode on an airplane and fell asleep. And when I got up, my right shoulder was down here. And it was pretty painful. And being a guy, of course, I didn't go to the doctor and I didn't do anything that I was supposed to do. And eventually it got better, but not by a lot. And I finally went to a doctor and they did an MRI, and they had a massive disc herniation between C5 and C6. And the doctor, quite honestly, couldn't believe that I was able to function as much as I had, and said, normally I would have recommended surgery for this right away, but given the fact that you've done everything up till now, I was about 4 months post-injury and I was still, doing all my stuff. He goes, I'm not going to recommend surgery. I'm going to recommend that you, simply rest it and let it heal, which is what I did.
You had the procedures done at that point, or this was just something you lived with for all of your life, this injury?
No, I had no procedures, and I'm really happy about it. When the injury happened, the doctor that was taking care of me wanted to do a tree-level fusion that night, and my dad intervened and called up a neuro-orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Danaher out of Rockford, and he looked at me and said, don't do surgery on this kid. He's 16 years old, his neck is stable. Within a couple of days, my arm had come back. I have permanent problems with it. I can't feel certain things, but it works. And they immobilized me for months. I was in a hard collar for 3-4 months. I was in a soft collar for another 3-4 months, but they didn't do surgery. So I've never had a procedure on my neck other than I did massages and I exercised and I did all of the things that I could to try. It wasn't until a year and a half ago that I suffered an injury where they were talking about surgery.
Yeah, and this injury you're referring to, was that when you were on the plane, or that was something else? Okay.
No, it was when I was on the plane. And I think it was a series of things that I did that led up to that, but the falling asleep on the plane was the main crux that caused that disc to rupture so significantly and caused the problems that I was feeling.
You mentioned obviously you were a football player, so you're pretty active by nature, but tell us a little bit more about some of the activities and like how this injury was limiting your quality of life, not just in terms of activities, but just day-to-day functioning and level of discomfort.
So when I was younger, it limited me a lot less. I still had to pay attention to it. The biggest thing was I couldn't do anything that would jolt my neck. When I was younger, that was the biggest thing. Quite frankly, my neck felt, if I wasn't paying attention, if you came up and shoved me from behind, it felt like my head would literally flip off. That's how weak it would feel. The biggest problem that I would have is I would get very significant headaches, to the point where the biggest problem is my right trapezius muscle. That muscle would freeze and it would go all the way through my head to my eye. And you could tell what was happening because my eye would go like this. Wow. And I would actually need somebody to put their elbow in that muscle and break it apart. And I would have to lay down and rest it for a good half a day. But I got into like my 40s, that started happening more and more, where it was like I had to really be careful when I was doing things. And so I did a couple of things to adjust. One of the things I did is I got a lot healthier. I quit eating certain foods. I found out later in life I had food allergies and food sensitivities, so I got away from those foods. Right. I started exercising a great deal more. 11 and a half years ago, I quit drinking alcohol. Those things all helped tremendously, reduce the inflammation in my body. That helped tremendously. If I really watched my diet, a lot of water-rich foods, a lot of water, no alcohol, very little processed foods, started taking much better care of myself physically, and then eliminated certain physical activities, but I still could see progression. So I actually did a marathon in 2019. My wife is a marathoner, and when her and I got together, I saw her do a marathon, so I decided, okay, I'm going to do one of these, and I was able to do that. Okay. And I actually proposed at the end of the marathon. I was able to actually get down on a knee and get back up. Wow. But yeah, and I was amazed I could do that, but there were limits to that too. I started to have lower back issues and a little numbness in my left leg. And when I saw the doctor, I said, am I having a problem with my lower back? And he goes, no, he says, that's actually your neck. The problem was C4, the two thingies where the nerves come out, one of mine was blocked. And he goes, that running, you're jarring that just enough that it's causing lower back problems and it's causing the numbness in your left thigh. And I got to where I couldn't bend over and pick things up. So I couldn't bend over and lift something, so my wife and I taking out the patio furniture in the spring, I couldn't help do that. Somebody had to come over and help do that. I could, if something was in the back of an SUV, I could grab it and carry it, but I couldn't bend over from the ground and pick it up. Wow, like I could stand and talk for 18 hours and it doesn't bother me at all. But if I go to a hotel or somebody's house and I need to plug something in, like a phone charger behind like a table next to a bed, that would cause problems because I'd have to bend over and look up like this. And that was, that was a big problem. So
very specific movements would exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, I could go run 3 miles, but I couldn't change a light bulb. If I had to look up to change a light bulb, I would feel that the next day. I would wake up with a very significant headache. Like I said, that right trapezius muscle, when that baby would go and freeze, and that the getting healthy reduced the number of times that would happen, and it would reduce how long I would feel the outcome from that.
But it was always there. What options? So Tim, you mentioned obviously lifestyle, but what other options had you tried? Were there any specific medications you were taking?
I'm not a big medication guy, so I hadn't tried much of that. I had tried physical therapy, and I didn't find that to be very effective. In fact, I found that to make me feel worse. I had tried chiropractic care, and I didn't find that to be effective either. I tried more intense massage techniques. So I tried Rolfing and I tried deep tissue massage. I also didn't find that to be very effective. The simpler things were more effective for me. So heat, I told you, like jacuzzi, when it got bad, icing, I would ice a lot. The one thing, couple of things that, and I tried when it would start to get sore, I would do the topical ointments, I would do BioFreeze, and I would do all that stuff. That stuff helped a little,
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that really did help was KT tape. That was very effective for me because it would relieve the muscle. But honestly, I hadn't really done much else that had a significant impact other than lifestyle. So as you and I talked about before this, I'm a big Tony Robbins guy. I'm one of his trainers. And so he, of course, wrote a book called Life Force.
Yep.
And he talked about stem cell therapy in Life Force. And he talked about his experience with stem cell therapy and his approach to that. And as soon as I read that, I was like, I'm going to do this. And honestly, it was a huge moment for me. Before that, I had heard about people doing surgeries to actually, I know that they replace the discs, but they're actually doing surgeries to replace the vertebrae. They're doing some of those in Europe. And when I heard about, that was the first time I had heard something that I thought, this could actually lengthen the amount of time before I'm very limited in terms of what I can physically do. My entire life, I was like, you're going to hit a certain point where all of a sudden you're going to be very physically limited. And right. I dreaded that. I very much worried about that. When I heard about that surgery, that was the first time I got excited about there being an option. One of the things that happens is you just learn to live with the pain, is you just go about your life and then you just compartmentalize it. So when I read the stem cell, it was the clouds lifted, and I am totally going to do this. I know how Tony works. When he decides to figure something out, he goes beyond what anybody else will and researches.
Yeah.
And I've done his stuff before, and I know it's effective. So I knew that I was going to do this no matter what. And then came the injury, and it was the catalyst. I'm like, okay, this injury happened. I said, now I'm going to do it. Now that's going to happen. And then I'm part of this Tony Robbins community, so we all talked about it, and people started doing it. People started getting steps on. We all started talking about, hey, is anybody doing this? Has anybody tried it? Where are you going? So I started researching. As I was doing the research, periodically I would just Google stem cells, and then you guys popped up. And I read about you on your website, and I was looking at you. I was looking at the place Tony went in Panama, and I was looking at another place in Mexico City. And I decided I'm gonna do you because you were close to my home. So that way I could go and get it done and I could come home and rest. And I wasn't in another country. I like these guys. I went and met with your team. I showed up and made an appointment, and I just felt very comfortable. I liked the facility, and so did my wife. And then when I went there, the person that talked to us was Billy. And she, in my opinion, she was very candid with us. She took us around the facility. The facility was lovely, but Billy was very candid with us about, here's my experience with this. And I truly appreciated that. I felt like the technological side, I was in as good a hands as I could be, because I looked at the background of the other places, and they were no better than you in terms of how long they had been using this, how much research they had done. Most of them were significantly less. So I felt very comfortable with your side of the technology. And then Billy made me very comfortable with the personal side of it, that you guys were going to take good care of. And I really appreciated that she was straightforward. She wasn't trying to be a salesperson about it. She didn't say, oh yeah, this is a miracle cure that's going to cure everything that you've ever had. She said straightforward, look, results vary. It depends on the individual. Some of it depends upon how long you've had the injury. She goes, my experience is most people have had very positive results, but results vary, and it depends on the person.
And the other thing, Tim, that's so important is you're a prime example of this. Mindset is so important. But then the other thing is your lifestyle. You're very energetic, you're athletic, you take care of yourself in terms of what you're eating. You can't come in after you've downed a bag of donuts and drank a bunch of Red Bull and say, hey, I'm not getting the results, obviously. That whole mind-body connection that's so important. You're an ideal patient because you've been attending to this stuff on an ongoing basis. So there's a lot of patients who don't. And so that's why, but I'm glad you mentioned that Billy was candid about how the saying I use is mileage makes error, right? It is not something that's, hey, just add water and I'm back to the races. So
Right. Absolutely. And I really appreciated that. I do. If somebody is talking to me about a product, I want them to be honest. And she was. And when I walked out, I felt very comfortable, and so did my wife. But I really liked her, and I really liked the facility, and I think you'll be a good hand. And I said, okay, I'm doing this. So I called up and I made the appointment, and away we went.
Tell me your experience with the other staff members. I'm assuming, was it Deborah who was your first point of contact?
Deborah was my first point of contact over the phone. And I had a great experience with her over the phone. She was very relaxed. Mm-hmm. She was very helpful, a lot of information. She was very responsive, not pushy at all, just very, what can I do for you? And she sent me all kinds of material to look at that was very helpful. The staff was great. When I was there, I was the only one in the facility that was being treated. And it felt very special. I mean, you walk in and the whole facility's just for you. And everybody incredibly attentive. Dr. Rosenberg, lovely man. I really enjoyed, and again, didn't sugarcoat. He told me about the process. Here's what you're likely to experience. And he was very straightforward about it. And I really felt in good hands with him. And that's why I came back. When we were in the area a couple of months later, and especially after I had met with the doctor and got my MRI done, I wanted to come back and say thank you because of the changes that I made. And so I am very comfortable with the team, very comfortable with the facility, very nice, took very good care of me. I felt overly taken care of. I felt too special.
Yeah. How was the team in terms of follow-up with you after the treatment?
Their follow-up was great. Billy is amazing. Okay, Billy would call me up. How are you doing? Do you need anything? My recovery was very easy. I had pretty good bruising. I had very little pain from any of the procedures. And they followed up very consistently, and I had direct numbers and I could contact people. I very much felt like if I needed something, they were there to help me.
I think it's helpful for patients to know coming in what to expect, because when you say the word healthcare, it's such a broad term, right? Because you've got hospitals, these gigantic edifices that are like several floors, and then you've got these private practice that are a little bit smaller, more intimate. Tim, I'd love if you could tell me a little bit more about your experience with the facility, your impressions of the facility.
The saying that it feels like a spa, that's very accurate. I thought the exact same thing when I came in, that it felt like a spa and not like a medical facility. And I agree with the recovery room. You start out in one room and then you go to another one. And like I said, everybody takes very good care of you. There's no pressure. You could stay as long as you need to. They bring you food. They bring you what you need to drink. They take very good care of you. You feel very pampered, quite frankly. That's why I think it looks like a spa in terms of when you walk into it, it's got that feel. And the way that you're taken care of, it does feel like a spa.
So how about from like start to finish, if you can just give us a walkthrough of showing up at the facility, things the timeline like.
So once you get signed up, when you come in to actually get your procedure, now I did 3 treatments, and that's what you guys recommend, and I recommend too. I agree with that approach. So mine went Wednesday, Friday, and then Monday. So you show up at the facility in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock. And doctor, you get greeted and get brought to your area, and Billy comes in and goes through everything with you and makes sure that you're okay, tells you how the process is gonna go. Doctor comes in, goes through all that stuff with you, but then you go down into the surgical suite. The extraction process does not take very long. I would take 20 minutes, 30 minutes, at max an hour in order to do the extraction process. So we did 2 bone marrow extractions, 1 on each hip. And then we did out of the belly fat in the stomach, which is simply just doing some liposuction and then taking it out.
On a scale of 1 to 10, like how was it overall?
My first bone marrow extraction was not bad. We got it on the first tap, and then he was able to extract it out, and then I was done. Then came the belly, and the pain level on the belly is very low. It's a 2 or a 3, but it is because you're awake, and all of a sudden it's shot, slice, and so it's a little, it's weird. Okay, this is happening, but there's very little pain. Then the second tap that we did was a little more intense because it took 3 tries in order to get it. And But between the doctor and Billy, they were very comforting. I'm not going to say that the pain was a 0. It was not a 10, but it was uncomfortable. The taps are uncomfortable, and I could feel the extraction too. But it's very quick.
But I guess if you were to compare it to something like surgery, it's definitely less.
Oh, yeah.
Less
And
painful.
here was the interesting thing. After that was done, I had no pain in my pelvis at all. 0. I didn't wake up sore. I had no pain whatsoever where the tap happened. I had to sit in the car to drive home. It didn't bother me. Sitting in a chair didn't bother me. So once that tap was done, my pain was 0, which I thought was weird. I thought with tapping a rod into my bone, I would have some sort of, I didn't have any. Now the belly, you have to wear something for a couple of days, and you do get a pretty decent amount of bruising, but none of it's horrible at all.
Yeah.
None of it.
Surgery.
To keep going as to how the process works. So you get into the recovery room and you've got an IV, and then the stem cells go into the IV and go into your body. You don't feel that at all. That's a non-event, and you could drink and eat lunch. Yeah, you're in the recovery room. I never stayed in the recovery room, I think, more than an hour. I would eat something, I would drink a little bit, and they would do the IV and the stem cells would go in, and then I got up and got out of it. I didn't feel nauseated. I didn't really feel anything. They told me not to drive, so my wife drove. But I was tired.
Yeah.
But I was fine. It was like, okay, I got the stem cells. Thank you. See you later. See you in a couple of days. And I would go home and I would just take it easy. So the recovery room, very lovely. You're very taken care of. I didn't have much of a recovery. Once the process was done, I get my IV, time to go without any real challenges whatsoever.
How was the experience with your conditions after getting the stem cell? What kind of benefits are you noticing to your condition, your improvements, and things you can do now that you might not have been able to do before?
One thing that I would like to say to everybody is give yourself downtime to recover. I think give yourself more downtime than you think. I could tell that my body was doing something right away. And right away, I was incredibly hungry. I was incredibly thirsty. I would sleep more than I normally did. And my body felt warm. I didn't have a fever or anything, but it felt like it was working. Okay.
Sure.
And for quite a number of days, that persisted. And I know this part sounds weird, but I honestly can tell when it feels like the stem cells are doing something. I mean, I can feel like my body is like it's happening.
Right.
And I felt like that constantly for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And then now something will happen and I'll even say to my wife, I'll say the stem cells are working. I get this feeling. So I would just like to say that. Don't think you're going to get the stem cells.
Yeah.
And then you're
And go run a marathon the next day.
give your body a chance. It's doing a lot of work. It needs rest. It needs food, healthy food, and it needs water, and let it rest. And I didn't do any significant physical activity for a month based upon your recommendation. I completely agree with that. You got to let the body get caught up. So now, what benefits did I get? Pain relief happened immediately. So lower back pain, neck pain, I saw changes in that immediately, especially my lower back pain. I used to have to be very careful about how I would sit. I couldn't sit in certain ways. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. I couldn't ride in a car in a certain way for too long. I couldn't sit in the theater chair for too long. That pain immediately started going away. It was only a couple of days and I bent over and picked something up and my wife was like, wow. I was like, yeah, it doesn't hurt anymore. And I waited a long time to do that. So I felt pain relief virtually immediately. Like the next day, after the first treatment, I started to feel pain. That happened that quickly. And that surprised me. I literally woke up the next day and I felt like my lower back didn't hurt as much. My neck didn't hurt as much. My knee didn't hurt as much. Like I just had less pain. I felt like that happened overnight.
Wow.
Now, in terms of the other responses, the more time that passed, the more I felt like things were better and better and better. I got my stem cells in July of 2022. I had an MRI in January of 22 that showed the ruptured disc between 4 and 5. But it also showed significant arthritic changes in my neck. And the two big things that it showed disc thinning between 4 and 5. And from the top looking down, it showed that the one nerve shoot and C4 was blocked. So now I get the stem cells in July. As the fall progresses, I'm feeling better and better and better. And I took it very easy, but I'm now bending over and picking things up. My neck feels better. My shoulder feels better. As I get more and more confident, I remember something needed to be moved, and I bent down and I picked this thing up that weighed like 40 or 50 pounds, and I carried it upstairs. And then my wife yelled at me and said, "Why don't you not do that until we have an MRI and make sure your neck is okay?" But like, I could just tell. I'm like, I just feel better. My daughter lives in California, and I went and saw her, and I bent down and I plugged in the cell phone charger. She normally would do that for me. And she goes, "Dad, what's going on?" I said, "I can do that now. I can do that."
Yeah. How about any specific activities? I don't know if you
I limited that. Yeah, I limited that. My lower back just stopped hurting, period. It used to be, like I said, if I sat in a car, I would have a problem. If I did certain things, I would have to like compensate for that. I could just tell my lower back I could sit in a lounge chair, which I couldn't do. I could never, I had to sit in a straight upright chair. I could never sit in the lounge chair. I couldn't do that. If I did that, my back would twinge and then I would be in pain and I couldn't bend over and pick anything up. All of a sudden I'm laying in a lounge chair for an hour and I get up and I look at my wife and I'm like, "Look, I can do this now."
Yeah.
So then a year later from the MRI, so it was December of 22, I got an updated MRI. The burst disc is 100% healed. I was cleared for all activities. But the big thing was, as soon as I saw the MRI, the disc thinning between 4 and 5, that disc had increased. And that's not supposed to happen. And you could tell it wasn't as thin as it was before. You could tell the curvature of my neck was better. And the doctor's looking at it, and as he looked at it from the top, that C4, that nerve root coming out, it was clear, which is my lower back. That's the lower back changes. And my neuro-orthopedic, when I told him that I did stem cells, was less than positive about that idea. He
Prior to coming in?
that, and when I told him that I got, his words to me were, "You should have taken that money and bought yourself a nice pair of shoes because you threw it away." That's what he said. But then a couple of months later, he's looking at my MRI and he had forgotten about this. He forgot what I told him. And he goes, "Your arthritis is better."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, and then he looked at from the top and he goes, "That nerve root has opened up." And I said, "Yeah, I can tell from my lower back." And he goes, "Wow, I guess the rest did you good." That was his.
The rest
did you good. But he looked at me and he goes, "You're 100% cleared to do whatever. You're good to go." And so I guess I don't want to overstate this, but I'm now doing things that I haven't done for years, literally for years. And I just got this like a couple of weeks ago, but I can't wait to get back into the weight room. And I did help carry in the patio furniture, and I moved some of the other stuff on my own. When I got done, I was like, wow, I could. The only problem I have is I haven't used those muscles for so long that after I did it, I was sore.
What about these? I'm curious to know, Tim, because obviously you're involved with the Tony Robbins events. And whenever you hear Tony Robbins, you think of a fire walk with me walking across the hot coals. I'm trying to imagine what were those events like, because those can be pretty exhausting, right? Those go for sometimes 12 hours, 15 hours a day. Like,
18 hours a day.
Yeah. What were those events like with the pain that you were experiencing?
The nice part about the events is I spend most of my time standing up. And with the injury that I had, I could stand up all day and I would be fine. But I can't look down and take notes. I couldn't do that. When I used to do the events years ago, you get your notebook and it's on your lap and you can sit down and
right.
I couldn't do that. When I had the herniated disc, we jump up and down a lot, and I would have to put one arm down and I would do it like this because I couldn't do it. It's like standing here at my desktop, I would type for a little while, then I'd have to put my arm down, and then I would type for a while. So standing, I was okay, but the lack of lower back pain and the lack of just general neck pain that I used to have. Right now, as I'm standing here talking to you, I have no lower back pain and I have no neck pain. And that's just not how I lived my life for a period of years before I went and did the stem cells. That's just not, how it would work. And doing the physical activity, a lot of times I would wake up and that back muscle would be frozen.
Yeah.
And I would have to try to get it to break up. And usually I would wear a neoprene patch with the lidocaine in it. And I usually had one of those on there and one of those on my lower back when I would do these events. And I don't have to wear them.
Have you been to an event since getting the treatment? Or
Oh yeah, several.
yeah, are they very different now? A different experience, or you're able to go?
Yeah, when I would do the events, I would compartmentalize that pain and I would just enjoy the event. But like I did an event in person in November.
Mhm.
So flew down on an airplane, drove a car, as you said, 18-hour days, did the fire walk, did all of that stuff, and came home without issue. In fact, I met my daughter in the airport in Chicago and O'Hare, and we went into Chicago and went to a concert,
Nice.
did all this other stuff. And that's not something I could do 10 years ago. I just couldn't have done that. My neck would have given out. I would have gotten sick. Normally, riding in an airplane like that, doing that, I would have needed some downtime.
Mhm.
And I'm on my feet the entire time. And yeah, it's a big change. It's a big change.
What about? That's awesome to hear. You alluded to this a little bit, but what are your friends and family, or your wife, your daughter? What kind of feedback are you getting from them?
Surprise. Not so much surprised that they didn't think it would help. They thought it would help. When we saw that MRI, that was a big deal. As I went into that MRI, I knew how much better I was feeling.
Sure.
And I said to my wife, I said, I wonder if the MRI is going to show that or not. And she goes, look, here's the deal. If it doesn't show it, whatever, you feel better. So however this process worked, it worked for you because you feel significantly better. If it does show it, then you're going to have a great story of success with this idea. And it showed way more than I ever thought.
Right.
And so that's now the story. And so now my daughter has had some health issues. And so she's excited because she's, look, I've got this option. This option is out there. There's some RA in my family. So some of the people are looking at doing that now. And generally, my dad and mom are very happy to see me feel it. You see your kid have this catastrophic event when they're in high school and watch them struggle with it. And now all of a sudden they're feeling better when they're almost 56. And they're just like, that's awesome. That worked out. And my brothers and sisters, they really followed along.
Now, your case is a little bit different from some people, especially for things like whether it's COPD or multiple sclerosis. Some people are on pretty heavy medication regimen, but it sounds like your situation is quite a bit different. It sounds like you were avoiding medication in general, but were there elements of your treatment plan, Tim, that you were able to modify if there were certain medications you were able to taper off?
Well, been able to pretty much get rid of what I did do. Okay, I still do the physical modifications. I just because I've gotten used to operating that way, but I have noticed that I can look down and write on some stuff now, and I don't wake up the next day like this. But the big thing is I would take Advil occasionally, and I don't do that anymore. But the patches, I use those patches all the time. I would even have to come to work and I had patches here, and I would have to ask staff to help me put them on my back, those lidocaine patches, because they would get that muscle to open up. Or I would have to go to an assistant and say, look, I need you to put your elbow right there. And that muscle would freeze so hard that it would take an elbow. You couldn't do it with your hand. It would take an elbow and you'd have to just break it apart. And I'm not doing that. I used to ice my back every morning. I started out every morning with ice on my lower back while I was doing my morning ritual. And I forgot, I don't do that. I don't ice my back ever. And even with the ice, I still would have problems. And I would have.
What are your future plans for stem cell therapy?
I'm not done doing stem cell therapy. I will definitely do it again. And anybody that's thinking about it, I highly recommend it. The big thing is this stuff can have a very positive impact. Take a look at it and see if it's right for you. I am super happy that I did it, and I can't wait. I'm now getting on a new workout regimen, and I can't wait to see where I'm going to be in 6 months. I really can't.
Awesome. No, it's incredible to hear. Tim, is there anything else? We talked about a lot of stuff here. Is there anything else you want to share about your experience?
I'd like to just thank you for doing it. Like I said, I dreaded the day when my neck failed since I injured my neck when I was 16 years old. And that day ultimately happened a year and a half ago. And at that point, I had discovered stem cells, and I was like, I can't wait to try this and see what it does. And it very much went beyond what I even had hoped. And then I'm not done. I'm only 6 months in. They're going to keep working for at least another 6 months. And so if anybody's thinking about doing it, do it. If anybody wants to talk to me personally, I'd be happy to do that, talk to you about my experience. I told all my trainer and senior leader brethren that I did this, and here's my results, and here's where I went. But I had a wonderful experience at your facility, and I certainly have had a tremendous response to the treatment, and I thank you for that.
Great. Oh, we're so grateful to you, Tim, for entrusting your health to us. It's always such a privilege and pleasure, and we look forward to hearing more about your continued journey with health, and we know the best is yet to come. So thanks again, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you very much.